Hello, everyone. We are seeing people joining in, 44 people, 46, the numbers that keep going up. So we now have almost 200 people signed up for this event. So thank you so much for everyone for signing up and showing up today. And you could have been somewhere else today, but you chose to be here. So we really appreciate it. So I'm going to introduce our today's event. I'm the co-host. I'm Jaylin Lee. I'm a director of dbNCR. And today's event is specially prepared by tBIMc and dbNCR together. So tBIMc, Jeff Isbister will be another co-host together with me. And I'm going to start introducing today's event. So if you can go to the next slide, Jeff. Yeah, so today's event outline will be a small intro of our organization, so dbNCR and tBIMc, and then we're going to ask you questions about ISO 19650, and we're going to do a little survey of 4 questions, and then we're going to go on with the 3 important presentations by MERVYN Richards, BEN FELTHAM, LEN VAISANEN. It'll be each 15 minutes, and we're going to keep the time very sharp. So if you have any questions, please submit through the chat or Q&A feature in Zoom, but we'll be answering the questions at the end during the panel discussion. And if we don't have enough time, we'll make sure that your questions are answered after the event. So after those 3 presentations, will follow by a panel discussion led by CHETNA CHAUHAN, and after the Q&A, and that will be the end of the presentation. So next slide. So I'm going to give you a small introduction about dbNCR. Next slide. So who are we? So dbNCR is a small acronym of a digital built national capital region. So we are a group of people who are coming from private practice and government and education. So our main goal is to promote integration of technology with the built environment. So we promote digital transformation. And by doing so, we aim to become the intersection of these stakeholders, facilitating discussion like today, and we promote learning and growth in the community. So we are a partnership with many different organizations, including Algonquin College and the Carleton Immersive Media Studio, and so on. And many of us actually in our board of members teach in Algonquin College in the BIM program or in the architecture programs. And it's important to mention that we are also an affiliate of 2 big organizations in Canada, which is Building Smart Canada and the ChemBIM. So next slide. So what is our mission? So our mission is not just integrating technology and promoting technology for its own sake. It has a purpose. We want to improve the quality of the NCR's built environment for all. So that should be the outcome of our organization. And to do so, we connect, like today, different stakeholders, different opportunities, and different research programs. And we develop the students, develop the professionals, and develop the programs, and we promote in the community. Next slide. So I'm going to show you the next 3 slides, which are just the examples of our contribution this year. We organized the 3 events. So as I mentioned, we connect, develop, and promote. So the examples are we connect local industry leaders, education and industry, and local and national leaders, and local companies with the potential clients and other digital communities to the events. So next slide. And we develop through educating and inspiring local community by facilitating local research and helping grow smaller local companies and provide guidances to students and influence digital implementations in post-secondary programs. And this particular event, we invited someone from Singapore, and we shared from the Canada examples and the Singapore examples, and we shared the lessons learned together. Next slide. And finally, we highlight local work to the national and international audiences. This one is together with the Quebec, BIM Quebec. We shared our knowledge, we promoted each other's work. And we also had last year, the BIM, a partnership with the BIM Africa. We had another huge event that was very successful. And through this, we promote local industry leaders and the use of digital technologies in our industry. So today's event is our fourth event of this year, and I'm very happy that you are able to join. And to be able to stay connected with us, please check our website or LinkedIn, dbNCR.ca. You'll be able to see the next year's upcoming event when it's organized. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jeff Isbister and then tBIMc organization. Jeff?
Sure, yeah, thanks, Jillian. So my name is Jeff Isbister. I'm the manager of BIM and digital practice at MGMA based in Toronto. And I'm a committee member of tBIMc. So tBIMc's mandate and objective is to build a local network across all facets of construction industry, centering focused on BIM and other digital technologies. Our mandate is to promote the use of BIM from design through construction and into operations, as well as share ideas and facilitate the opportunity to create solutions to the shared challenges we all face. tBIMc is also an affiliate of Building Smart Canada. We do a lot of events basically at tBIMc. That was our kind of focus for a long time, as well as a poll that I'll get to. There's a series of events we've done in the past on e-permitting to see, like trying to push that forward. We've helped organize a Women in BIM chapter here in Canada. We also have had things on BIM construction, IPD, and so on. One of our major kind of things we've produced as a tBIMc and started getting the ball rolling was our Bim National Survey. The last one was our third annual Bim National Survey, and we're bringing it back up for 2021 after kind of the gap that happened with COVID. And ACO was leading this effort this time around. And the exciting part is that the survey is to be released really soon in the coming weeks. So please look out for that. It's gonna be great. As far as what the National Survey does, it collects a comprehensive understanding of BIM application in Canada. It benchmarks our progress. It lets us gain insights, respond to regional needs, but generate national initiatives at the same time. So tBIMc, please join us. We will be sending out mailers, basically reminding people to fill out the poll is really important, and as well as for future events. And I'll leave this now to Omar for the poll.
It's great. 73% participated. The answer is, Jeff?
Yeah, it's pretty well split along the lines here. So yeah, that's great.
Great. So design and construction is the most usage in the BIM currently, and then design only and full life cycle management. Is surprising to see actually some numbers in full life cycle management.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that. You'd think that how the industry has gone, it's been design only for so long. So it's an interesting result here.
Great. Next one, Omar. So what is your current level of knowledge on ISO 19650 standards?
So yeah, it looks like we have a moderate level of knowledge of ISO, which is actually pretty decent. I actually expect the number of low be pretty high, so that's great. And then 13% with high knowledge, and an expert level of 5%. Do you feel that ISO 19650 standards can be applied to government, public sector, private sector, or both? All right, so overwhelming answer is both. So that just kind of tells everyone that this is a really important presentation and an important topic to talk about. And then the final question, based on your current level of knowledge, do you see a full implementation of ISO 19650 in your practice? We have 60% saying no, you don't see full implementation in your practice, and we have 40% saying yes. I saw someone's note come in saying maybe in 10 years, but next month, no. And I think that's, I think through the presentations, that will be really clear. All right, we'll move on to the presentations here. We're really lucky to have MERVYN Richards calling all the way from the UK. It's his end of day. It's our start of day here to call in. MERVYN is Director of Building Smart UK and Managing Director of MR1 Consulting. He is the author of the PAS 1192 Part 2 specification for information management for the capital delivery phase of construction projects using BIM. In 2013, MERVYN was awarded an OBE for services to construction in BIM, and he will be speaking on the efforts of ISO 19650 on international standards. All right, take it away, MERVYN.
Right, thanks very much. What I'd like to do very quickly is to just give us a quick understanding of where this all started, where ISO 19650 started. This came about in the 1990s when a lot of reports that have been produced by the UK government over a 100-year period, sorry, but it is a long time, and all the reports produced during that 100-year period demonstrated that there was something wrong with our industry. Many reports were written, and very few, if any, were ever adopted. This was a statement made in 1901 at the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, AGM, and they made the statement that it is quite impossible for surveyors to take out quantities from drawings, such as sometimes comes from architects, that are imperfectly finished and possibly incorrect. And this has pervaded all of the reports ever since. In fact, there is another statement around this 30 odd years later by Bossum when he was looking at the work in the US and Canada that demonstrated that the US and Canada could build faster, cheaper, and pay better wages to their industry than was the case in the UK. Next slide, please. What was needed was to look at all of these reports and see what we could garner from them and see if we could actually eradicate a lot of the problems. This work was carried out during the 1990s and eventually resolved itself after a major project delivery with BAA, British Airports Limited, where they had a collapse of a tunnel on their site. And the health and safety executive came in, could not find all of the record information that was going to be, so that they could allocate responsibility from the professional indemnity insurers. And they made a statement that from there on, all projects, certainly from BAA, had to be carried out in such a way that a full audit trail of all transactions and means of working was kept. So we had to develop a means of keeping hold of all of the information and transactions on the project. So John Egan, who was the CEO at that time, asked us also to look at a new way of working to see if we could overcome a lot of the problems that had brought about this disaster, and also to deliver the requirements of the health and safety executive for the future. So what happened was a whole thing called the Common Data Environment was generated and tested on that project to completion, and was then applied or implemented on the building of Terminal 5 over a 10-year period. So this was a well recognized set of methodologies, fully tested. The research that was carried out during that time demonstrated that we could save 20% of the project cost. We could actually reduce it by 20%. The actual figure set by BAA was 10%. They were so successful in the methodology and the measurements over that period that they eventually became a British standard, which was BS 1192-2007. After the economic crash of 2008, the British government was changing from a Labour Party to Conservative Party at that time. There was no money in the coffers, and they needed to find some way of continuing to generate all the hospitals, schools, and infrastructure that we required at a reduced cost. So better value, deliver on time and deliver to cost. These were some of the problems that we had found in the industry and had eradicated during these programs. So what happened then was the government adopted BS 1192-207 and its processes, and started to generate and develop a thing called BIM Level 2. And that required the writing of a number of new standards. In fact, they became publicly available specifications, PAS 1192 Part 2, and a whole series of these were developed. They were then implemented on a lot of other major projects through what was known as the Avanti program, and each project that they were implemented on showed considerable savings in time, gave better profit margins, and also saved money for the client. And they were such a success of these BIM Level 2 methods of working. They were globally accepted as the best processes that were out there that had been measured and published to reduce waste and to enable timely delivery. They were so successful that the world actually saw them as a unifying, harmonizing ability for the global industry. And so under pressure from the international community, the UK HMG and the BSI, the British Standards Institute, agreed to convert the British standards and the PASs to a series of international standards. However, there was a problem in doing this conversion. There is always a problem in converting standards, national standards, into international standards, because there are lots of people involved in doing that internationalization. However, this was a statement made by Paul Shawcott, who was one of the authors, converting the PASs to the ISO, who said the first 1192 standards to be internationalized were BS 1192, covering the collaborative production of information, and PAS 1192 parts 2 and 3. 3 took us out of the project information delivery, CapEx, into the OpEx world, the asset information management activity. So these were the 3 standards that were originally converted. One of the things they had to do was, as lead authors, the first steps that he and David Churcher had to do was to extract from these 3 base documents the basic information and remove all of the UK isms, such as the UK government's BIM strategy, BIM Level 2, and UK specific references. So basically, the documents that have been found to be so successful and wanted to be, the international community wanted to be converted, on doing that conversion, they basically removed a large number of the elements that had made them such a success. Such is the nature of developing these standards. Next slide, please. The other statement made was there were also big benefits for large multidiscipline, multinational organizations that for many years had struggled to accommodate the differing requirements of their customers, partners, and suppliers. What they were really stating here was that there was too much fragmentation in the global industry, that everybody had a different way of working, nationally and internationally. And in fact, even from the point of view from the client base, kept changing their minds on what they wanted. So it was hoping that the ISO 19650 series provided a unified approach for each country and office within an organization to adopt. So this became a framework when this was converted, of which there are modifications. One thing I'll hasten to add, you've just done the poll on the introduction of ISO 19650. You must remember that ISO 19650 is covered by quite a number of different documents. 1, 2, 3, 4 is in work at the moment, 5, 6. And there are other standards around that nationally that change the base concept. Some of those you haven't seen yet, so implementing them all at this time would be an impossibility. Within 5 years, certainly you should be able to achieve that. Next slide, please. So what was basically removed? As I've mentioned, the whole of BS 1192-207, certainly the Courier Addendum A2 2016, which formed the basis of the savings for construction waste and the ability to deliver on time. The hub of BS 1192-207 is basically the common data environment and how people share information, so a collaborative activity. So it provided an environment for project team collaboration, proven ability to deliver projects that reduce costs for the client and risk for all of the members of the design team and construction. It was very prescriptive in the way that it was written. So there was only one way to work. And that was a very highly disciplined and structured method of delivery. The reason for doing this was to make sure that we could come up with teaching aids or training aids education, where we could educate the whole industry towards a single way of working, because it was found during the research that this was the best way to make sure that you could deliver. If everybody has a different way of working, you cannot collaborate and you will not make these savings. A common data environment was an explicit guidance in itself. So that BS 1192 document was very, very explicit in the methodologies and workflows. And this was replaced in the ISO by some very basic principles. So things like a file naming convention was not actually confirmed. And this was very important to the way in which the common data environment operates. So now you have to modify for each national application of the international standard, you have to apply some national annexes to fill the gaps that have been left in the ISO. Next page, please. So we have a flexible framework that allows every project and the appointing party, the client, to define the rules. So instead of there being a highly disciplined and very specific way of working, it can be modified by the client to say how they want it to be working on their projects. And they can apply this, they can apply something different to each and every project that they produce. So even on serial clients that normally would work to one set of standards, they could change it between each of the projects. So there's no consistency. And each country would have to define through its national annexes those other items that were needed to make the ISO 19650 work. So it looks as if we may have ended up not providing an international unified approach, but perpetuating the problems that we had in the industry that didn't provide the requirements for their customers, partners, and suppliers. It also allowed national variations through the use of these national annexes. Next slide, please. So basically, having removed everything in the original standards that demonstrated the value and removal of waste, what do we have? Well, as I said, we have a framework that we basically have to put back together. One of the concerns is, let's say in Europe alone, if this was applied across Europe alone, you would have 27, possibly 27, national annexes that would modify the way in which ISO 19650 would work. So we have the propensity to actually start generating a non-standard way of working. So is it actually still a standard? Next slide, please. So one of the things I'd like to show you and how these deviations occur is that one of the first changes that have come out and been published recently, a couple of months ago, was actually the Irish standard. This is the Southern Irish variance. So the publication of the Irish Annex created great commotion and a lot of comment on Twitter. I've just noticed, by the way, you can't see the bottom of my slides. There is actually a note down on each one to help you follow this. So what happened on Twitter? We got these comments. So can it now be called a standard? If we've got so much variation, is it a standard? Second one, with the Irish and UK markets so interlinked, companies operating in both regions, was there any real need for a different version and a different annex? National attitudes tend to say yes. Comment was not wanting to be the person, but it does bring into question of what the national annex is really all about. If the purpose of an ISO is to harmonize a global industry and the national annex can fundamentally change it, is it still a standard? So these were some of the immediate reactions and comments to the publication of the Irish standards. Next slide, please. Even in the UK, we had to produce a national annex to perpetuate what we were doing originally before the ISO was converted to ISO. So these things had to be put into place as a national annex. And you can see here that it actually changed 3 times over a very short period of time. So even in the UK, the guidance documents that are now being produced are different and seem to be varying every 6 months or so. Next slide, please. And you can see not just through the Irish activity, there are also others around the world. I'll leave you with these slides to look at later. Sorry, next slide, could we see? So there are changes to the wording, volumes and systems. Status code changed across each one of these. So with the Irish code, you can see we've got P1, P2, P3, which are all about purposes of issue and not about statuses. We have acceptance codes now, which are about issued, accepted, etc. So it's totally muddled the whole thing around revisions and status. Next slide, please. So different codes, different status codes, different sign-off processes, etc. And this has meant that considerable costs will be imposed on projects, re-education, retraining, reconfiguration of the CDEs, etc. And it moves us even further away from this industry unification. I have, I think, about half a minute. So if we could go to the next slide. And to the next slide, please. Oh, you haven't got it. It's okay. Yeah. What I was going to give you in this last slide is the Hong Kong standards have also been published. They were published earlier on in this year. And I would advise you to go to Google, Google the Hong Kong standards, where they have, I think, brought about a great amalgamation of the original standards, the ISO work, and their local national requirements, and have amalgamated those into a single standard with a lot of supporting documentation. I would advise you to look at that to see how things can be done. Thank you for listening.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mervyn. So next presenter will be Ben Feltham from AECON. So Ben is a director of integrated digital delivery at AECON Group and is leading the implementation of BIM, digital construction, and digital transformation for AECON. So in 2020, Ben was awarded On-Site Magazine and Site Partners Top 40 Under 40 in Canadian construction. So Ben was also involved with the adoption of BIM through the UK BIM mandate, supporting the development of PAS 1192 Part 2 through the UK BIM task group. So Ben will be speaking about the challenges of translating ISO 19650 in Canadian construction and how AECON has adopted the standard series at our upcoming event right now. Okay, Ben, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, thank you everyone for your time and taking time out of your lunch to listen, and thank you, Mervyn, for agreeing to do this and coming to help us as well. So obviously I come from the UK previous to joining AECON, and I was brought over 3 years ago by AECON, and I previously worked with Skanska in the UK, and I was, you know, developing the whole, how do we push this on our infrastructure projects, and working with people like David Frost, who in line worked with Mervyn Richards. So I had their sort of mentoring in developing this. And it was while I was there, I got a call from some company called AECON. Who is this AECON? Because people get us confused with AECON. So just for everyone's knowledge, we're you know, one of Canada's largest construction company. We work across North America, mainly Canada. We're doing a little bit in the US, and we're starting to look internationally now. And with Canadian infrastructure, it's majorly growing. So we've got big projects, and you know, AECON realised we need to invest in this. So let's find someone and let's truly invest. And they've been true to their word, and I will say that. So just going on to my first slide. So some of the challenges I see, I was quite shocked when I come here. The size of this country, huge, okay? And then we have provinces, and we have a federal government. It's not like UK where we got one government driving it. We got multiple governments. And actually what that's led to is I've started to work across Canada, and AECON operates across. You see different contract models across the different provinces. And different ideas to what collaboration is and isn't. And some of the areas within Canada is very, I call it an old school method of contract, which is if you do not oblige to the contract, there's no system in place for identifying issues. It's straight to litigation, boom, and through that process. So that, I think, adds challenges when we're talking about a BIM environment, when we're talking about collaboration, bringing data together, coordination of different parties on a big major project. That can align to some challenges there. The other thing is government investment. I'm not sure at the top there's been true investment. There's a lot of push, and I'll touch on some push around what Building Smart are doing, which is fantastic, but I'm not sure at the top it's truly understood and invested yet. And industry collaboration, which I touched on before. But, you know, what's really good is events like this, where we got Toronto BIM community, we got CanBIM and other things that we do and we get involved in, and that's great. And that's the start of it. But I'd love to see something a bit more, you know, where the industry can take the lead a bit. And that's something the UK have done with the UK BIM Alliance. And maybe there's something there we can hook onto. And then there's the education and market resources. So I'll be honest, like my opinion of how the education's going with BIM within this market from where I've come from, I get a lot of people that are good at Revit, but not necessarily understand the BIM process. And that's one of our biggest challenges. So since joining Canada, I've actually lost a bit of hair because I'm doing a lot of training, mentoring, and trying to push this through and build our own team. And we've built a fantastic team. And but, you know, I want to really try and drive that out into the industry, and hopefully some events like this will help us do that. Okay, so a bit of an intro there and some of the challenges. So just to make everyone aware, there is a Canadian annex being developed, and it's actually been based on the UK annex and some of the things that MERVYN touched on. And that's being led by Building Smart. Eric Pryor, if people know Eric, is driving that for Canada. And at the moment, it's been socialized for comment. There's a couple of working groups through Building Smart, and there's a link in the presentation. I'm more than happy for the link to get shared publicly if people want to go and find out some more. On to the next one. So how did I implement this thing at ACON when I didn't really have a 19650 requirement in my contracts? But it doesn't mean I can't follow the ethos of ISO 19650, right? So MERVYN touched on it. Common data environment. That's the first place I started. What is a common data environment? How do we split that environment? Not one size necessarily fits all, but as long as the information is structured the same way and we're following that structure that's set out within ISO, we can implement something at our level. Okay, so that was where I started, and that's what we've built out and invested a little bit in. If we go to the next slide. I always bring this up because I think people forget about this. It's called status coding. I actually preferred the word suitability. So anyway, utilizing our status coding with our information through the workflow that we've implemented. Okay, that was one of the things that I've found when I have conversations with my supply chain, I have conversations with my clients or partners. This is not actually one of the realized points, that as information travels through the common data environment, there's a status applied to that allows us to control it contractually and allows us to control it for sharing. And it's the biggest thing that I find is missed. And that really helps, because it helps when I'm working on a design and build project and I have a designer working for me and they're sending me, I can tell them, look, you can give us that information, define the status of that, and I'll use it as per that status. Okay, and we have that in our design agreements. So that's something that we implemented as well. And I think it's one of the bits of ISO which I think gets missed, and people focus heavily on the work in progress, share, publish, but they forget about this bit. So that's something there that I've seen in North America. On to the next step. And the exchange information requirements. About a week and a half ago, some good news. One of our major infrastructure clients actually issued us an exchange information requirements for the first time, which was absolutely fantastic. So we can see a major infrastructure client looking at doing this. So that was fantastic. The only thing I will say now is now if we go through the project, it's going to be an interesting journey, and we'll have to very much collaborate on implementing that. But what I did internally is, even just for my own supply chain, I've defined now this common data environment that I want to do, and I've defined as a contractor, these are certain things I want to leverage the data for to help me construct a job. I developed my own exchange information requirements, or whatever we want to call them, organization requirements, that I've put into subcontracts to help me deliver the job. Okay, my CEO tells me all the time, or tells us all the time, we're here to make money. So make money, and that's what I'm here to do. So that's what I try and do, and I try and make things as efficient as possible. I ensure my supply chain and designers have these requirements. And on another note, just because the client hasn't formally given us an exchange information requirements, they do have, some of them have BIM standards, CAD standards, survey standards, document control standards. We can take that and sort of say, this is what the client really wants, and sort of leverage it and bring it together. And then we can present it back to the client. And we've done that in some cases and said, this is like, this is what, and this is what we need from you. We need a representative from your side to help us manage this. And we've done that on a couple of our contracts. And that's actually one of the things that I think led to the recent change from one of our big major clients, where they've now driven an EIR out. So on to the next slide. And we've really put this at the core of, as I explained, the core of everything we do. And if you're an organization, if you're a contractor in this environment, or a designer or an architect, you're trying to do this, please do one project at a time. Don't try and take all your projects on at the same time. Target the projects, look for your complex projects where this can help, and go that way. And we've done that. We recently did it on the Gardner Expressway project. It was a huge construction project in terms of, we was rehabilitating one of the busiest cores of Toronto, replacing the bridge deck in a jigsaw puzzle prefabricated manner. And we utilized ISO for the workflows and the quality management, and we integrated with survey, and we managed it all the way through, and it was very, very successful. And we had status coding and workflows, and we had the common data environment for our supply chain, and our engineers were part of it. So it was, we did it ourselves. We didn't need to be told, and we didn't have to wait to do it. There's a lot of best practice there. There's a lot I can bring from the UK, a lot I can bring from people like MERVYN to help me do this, right? So on to the next slide, please. And set your minimum standard. So we internally have set a minimum standard that we want to hook our design into basically our controls, so we can track and manage our projects. Now, Acon has an interesting thing. It's a very diverse business. So we don't just do big contracts, subcontract that work. We also self-perform. So on the self-perform elements, this is extremely powerful, right? So I can do a big design and build, self-perform, and I can track where I am and what I'm doing, and how that directly impacts my finance. So that's how we try and leverage it on some of our major projects where we have self-perform elements to them as well. So on to the next slide. And this is something that I pinch with pride from Skanska, and David Frossell was a leader in this, was around areas of IDD. We call it, and the reason we call it IDD and not BIM is because North America think BIM's Revit. That's just anyway. And what we try to do is, these are the different areas that we're trying to implement. Okay, all of it as a core of the ISO to it, but looking at a different project, what areas can we target, and how can we do this one step at a time? So we have different areas, and then what I do with that on the next page is then I look at, what is my contractual requirement? So is there anything in the contract that I could basically convert into an EIR? And what is my project risk? So where is my risk sitting? Can I hook this to my risk? And then I present this to the project director and say, hey, got this BIM thing. This is where it can help you. This is how it can support your risk. And that goes down, that seems to go down really, really well. And I know it's been pretty successful because we started with one project. We're currently running about 15 projects in my team. We've seen natural growth through the business. And it's not just in the infrastructure space as well. We have industrial as well and other areas coming on board with this process. And then on to the next role is obviously the biggest part of it when we're building out our execution plans is, you know, as the ISO states, it's the roles and responsibilities and your key activities being very clear. And also let's make it clear to our clients, these are the people you need to put in place, and clear to our supply chain, these are the, you know, task team members you need to put in place. So, and that's how we, you know, and we really try and engage conversation. So when you're doing your planning, think of your requirements, think of your roles and responsibilities, and then your key activities. Really break it down and really understand your commercial model that you're dealing with as well as you're doing this. So it goes back to the start. You know, the UK did have an advantage. They had more of a collaborative contractual model coming at the same time as the BIM mandate, and it really did sort of amalgamate itself together. And then on to the next slide, please. Yeah, and then supporting and identifying your risks. And also don't forget, it doesn't stop with, it's not a design, not just design. Okay, let's remember we have shop drawings and supply chain that produce stuff in the design and build world that can sometimes cause us problems. So make sure they're part of the process as well. So they're the cornerstones of how we leverage this on our projects. We have existing conditions, survey captured on site, push through our workflow, work in progress, shared, status coding applied, then it's shared with a consultant. Consultant knows how to use it, how to leverage it, and then they share their information to the supplier, and it all comes back to that one core. Okay, next slide. And then benefits. So think about your benefits. How can you link it to your business benefits? So we've been doing that internally. We pushed it back to some of our key focus areas that are in the business plan, and just keep that up to date, especially as you're progressing this. You need to be able to socialize it. You need to be able to pull it up a level. And that really helps with some of the engagement and leverage internally. And then, and this is my final slide, really, just reiterates everything I've said. We can talk about the different dimensions. We can talk about the levels, but we, you know, take it basic, one step at a time, go through, think change management. And I know MERVYN, it got removed, but obviously the BIM wedge, I still use it today. It really helps take people through step by step. And it's, you know, it's available. I'm sure MERVYN, I don't know, he might kill me, but I'm sure it doesn't matter if it's shared, because it really does help people understand the step-by-step process. So that's it from me. That's my perception of where you know, Canada is, I think, on a BIM journey, probably 10 to 15 years behind where the UK is. I think it's starting to mold, there's things happening. I think there's a lot of change in different areas that needs to happen. But if we can come together as an industry and work together, we can see huge change. And the UK and others have shown that. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Ben. Appreciate your effort of bringing it across the ocean. Everything that's been learned, that's great. And then pushing it, driving it here in Canada. Just go here. That leads us to our final presenter before we go into our panel discussion. Len has been working in real property for over 20 years in various positions, mostly at PSPC within the National Capital Region. Currently, he is the manager of Building Technologies program at the Science and Parliamentary Infrastructure branch. Building Technologies incorporates 3 streams of services: geomatics, building informatics, and BIM. The program is relatively young, but they are growing, learning, and continuing to evolve. Len is here to speak about the efforts aligning, their efforts aligning with ISO 19650 at the Science and Parliamentary Infrastructure branch. All right, take it away, Len.
Okay, thanks very much. So maybe Jaylin, if you can share the slides, that'd be great.
All right, here you go.
Yeah, maybe that's the last one.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. We can go backwards if you like. I don't know.
All right,
So,
I'll let you start from the beginning.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, like thank you, Jeff and Ben and MERVYN. I don't know if I can follow you guys because you bring a lot of wealth and experience to the table, but we'll do our best. And like Jeff pointed out, we'll just talk about our early adoption or early entry into ISO 19650 at SPIB. So next slide. So a little bit of background and context so that you can understand where we're coming from. So we are owner and operators of culturally significant assets, primarily Parliament Hill and some assets on the north side of Spark Street. Our key clients are House of Commons, Library of Parliament, and the Senate of Canada. We only represent a very small portion of the entire public service and Procurement Canada portfolio. There's roughly 3,500 assets across the country. Ours were responsible for 36 assets, individual assets. So you can see we're relatively small, but we do have some important buildings, and the image there in the Peace Tower, that's one of the important buildings that we manage. So we're treated somewhat like a region within the country, even though we're physically very small. A little bit of background on where we came from. In 2007, we started exploring using BIM, mostly in project delivery and design areas only. And there was a lot of interest and a lot of eagerness to adapt BIM, but there was a lack of consistency in approach, either because we didn't have proper standards that we were following, or early adopters, while they got out of the gate early, they weren't necessarily following proper BIM practices. So we realized that we had a lot of inconsistencies in how we were using BIM and how it was being delivered, and at the end, some of the outputs were quite different as well. So in 2017, our national program started developing an approach for BIM services. And in 2020, the building technologies team was formed, and that's what I'm manager of. And BIM plays a part of that. So the other services that we provide in building technologies is intelligent buildings and innovation, data analytics and software, as well as the geomatics team and GIS and the BIM team are all under the building technologies umbrella. Next slide. So just quickly, our vision of where we want to go now, we're just starting out, as was previously mentioned, but this is our long-term plan in the next 5 to 10 years. Hopefully we can start being there. So number one, try to develop a high level of in-house capacity. Our team right now is very small, although we have some fairly clever people on the team. We just don't have enough resources to meet some of the demand. We want to be able to continuously reinforce our skills and knowledge throughout the community at SPIB. Not just for our internal users, but also for end users as well. Continuing to develop requirements documents, such as the AAR and EIR, et cetera. And then maintaining and refreshing IMIT solutions and hardware. This one's a challenge for us as public servants. We're often slow to adapt to new technology or to get new software on board, and it takes a long time to go through our procurement processes. So this is one of our challenges, I think, going forward as the technology changes, making sure that we can have access to that readily. Finally, we want to be able to leverage our BIM models for innovation, linking into our IoT. I mentioned briefly that intelligent buildings is part of our portfolio, so we want to see how we can leverage that input of data into operational models going forward. And then that would lead us to a fully integrated digital twin concept, where you have a live digital twin versions of our assets embedded into regular workflows. So next slide. So how did we start out on this 19650 alignment? So we're calling it alignment rather than, and there would be a requirement for a large culture shift in order for us to fully adopt ISO 19650. So we had some conversations with our national program to make sure that we could be aligned with their direction as much as possible. So they are planning on developing a vision, which is underway right now, which should be launched in the next few months. So what we ended up doing was looking at 19650 standards and trying to say, where's a good starting point for us? And we chose to start at the highest level with the OIR as a parent document. We felt that that was a good start for us because it would supplement some of the work being done at our national program, and we didn't want to necessarily, we wanted to be aligned as much as possible and continue to support them. Following that, we hope to develop some additional templates such as AIR, EIR, BP, etc. Next slide. So understanding, so our OIR development. So we had a process that we developed to implement the OIR. Sorry, just 1 second. Working from home is wonderful things sometimes. Sorry about that. It's lunchtime. So first thing we did was we did some stakeholder engagement. We tried to understand where we were going nationally from PSPC. We did environmental scans to see what systems we're using for capturing operational data, where this data was housed and where it resided. Then we did a number of stakeholder engagement sessions. I would say we did about 7 or 8 engagement sessions with a variety of stakeholders. We organized and gathered that information. We developed a draft of the OIR, and then we recycled it through a few times, gathering more feedback, making adjustments, making changes. And we have a draft that's almost ready for acceptance at this point. So it's a pretty good final document, we believe. So next step. So some early lessons learned on this. So number one, when we look at the ISO 19650 standards, it was very difficult for us to just plop it into our organization off the shelf. So there was some modifications that we had to apply, and we'll get into those a little bit later. The other thing that we found was, from an OIR perspective, there are limited examples of this out in industry right now. So it's not like we would have hundreds of samples to kind of pick from and guide us. So it was really new for us as well. We found it helpful also to create a database for our information requirements. So this is basically a listing of all the types of information that would be required feeding into the OIR. So it's a separate entity on its own, but we're finding that that's quite helpful. Finally, because it's a new concept for a lot of people within our organization, getting that what's in it for me for each stakeholder was important. So making them understand, or not making them, helping them understand how this will benefit them in the long run was really helpful as well. Next slide, thanks. So as I mentioned, we had to make some adaptations with our OIR in order to make it sort of fit within our organization. So for example, one of them is terminology. We had to modify some of the terminology because it just was I'll say it wasn't relatable to our organization. The other thing too that was key was some of the roles and responsibilities identified in ISO 19650 didn't properly align with some of our roles that we have currently in our organization. Some key examples like the information manager roles, for example. We have existing positions and in some cases multiple people contributing to that, so we don't have an identified information manager. So that whole concept we need to adapt in order to get it to work properly for us. Oh, and we also have an internal project delivery system called Project Navigator. So we tried to align the OIR as much as possible with the Project Navigator process. So there was a little bit of modifications that we needed to do in order to be able to have that align as much as possible. Next slide. So that's it for the OIR development from our perspective. Just wanted to highlight this as well. So this is an organization that we set up internally. It's called the Bim Governance Committee. It's a committee of key stakeholders within our organization, from the projects teams to the operational teams, corporate planning, and including our National Center of Expertise. And basically, we're brought together as a forum to help create consistency in our approach across our branch for delivery of BIM. We often share information and we're learning from one another as we're going. We're focusing kind of on things that is important to the end users. So the data that we're using on a daily basis, how is that data created and where is it stored? And to gain a better understanding as well of the assets we're managing. Some of our assets have unique properties and heritage characteristics that make it a little less than ordinary, I'll just say that. And so this is basically the focus of this BIM Governance Committee, and we find it very helpful to have this organization internally. Next slide. So just briefly, some immediate next steps for us. We're going through an exercise where we're prioritizing our assets. So we have models for almost every asset, but in some cases we don't have models for some of our buildings, but we're going through a process to sort of say, okay, which buildings for us should we start looking at to digitize and to transform and to create requirements documents for these assets. So that's one exercise we're going through. Currently also we're developing repeatable templates for our AIRs. Now, understanding that the asset information requirements will vary from asset to asset, we're looking at generating something that can be repeatable, so that we're showing that consistency across the board. We're also participating in the BEP development that's being led by our national program in partnership with DND and with FERPAC and Building Smart. So once we get through some of those steps, like for example, once we start hammering out some of our AIRs, we're then hoping to update and create models where we don't have them currently, or where there might be updates required to existing models. And then, of course, we're going to continue to explore BIM functionality in terms of operations. Now, that's our key focus, is operational delivery. And oftentimes, like I saw somebody mentioned something in the chat that's saying, when we're looking at the poll results, that they're not currently there, but they would like to start using full life cycle for using BIM in the full life cycle process of our buildings, and that's where we want to get to. So really, we're looking at applications right now where BIM could help our operational teams on a day-to-day basis, and we're going to continue to explore some of that. So I think that's the end of the presentation. So thanks very much.
All right, thanks so much, Len. That was great. this leads us to, let me just share my screen here. Just wanted, before we go into the next step here, I just wanted to reiterate how it's kind of a cool thing that we got here as far as a group of people for this discussion. We have someone that was kind of the beginning of was part of the beginning of the standards in the UK, which we all know as world leaders. We have someone that was able to work underneath MERVYN and learn from him kind of thing and bring it over to the ocean, to Canada, and is kind of leading it from a private point of view. And then we also have a public sector person as well, pushing the ISO standards also here. So I think this is going to be a great discussion for our panel. We are also lucky to have CHETNA with us that will be leading the discussion. CHETNA is an architect by training. She's a BIM advocate by passion. She has over 10 years of experience in BIM in Canada and internationally. In 2019, CHETNA started her BIM consulting company, BIMwise, helping the AEC industry and construction industry professionals adopt BIM within their organization. And over to you, CHETNA.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm able to moderate this discussion. I'm so excited. First of all, I was so looking forward for every presentation. I learned a lot. A lot of my questions that were at the back of my mind, MERVYN and Ben and Len's presentations, just those questions was just answered right away. So it's a great presentation. I'm really happy to be part of this panel. So I do have still some questions in my mind, and I wanted all the guests. I know in some part of your presentation you have addressed that, but let's reiterate some of these things. And my first question is that, I mean, it's not just exclusive to our industry, to AEC. In any industry, when there is digital transformation, there are three things that we are looking at in digital transformation, which is communication, collaboration, and the quality of data. How do you guys think that we are addressing these three important issues by adopting ISO standards? I think we can start with MERVYN.
Okay. Perfect. I'm off the hook. You go, MERVYN.
MERVYN, I think you're mute.
Icon. Thank you. Just have to get the right icon, otherwise you're dumb as anything. Yeah, no, the major thing here of whether it's ISO 19650, whatever, the processes around the common data environment, I have to push those a little bit harder. That's where the collaborative process really is. This is where the teams share information continuously. So they are sharing their information as early as possible. But what they must also do is make sure that they give trust to other members of the team, that the information they're supplying doesn't have to be complete, but it must be accurate, and that it has been checked against an agreed set of activities. This builds trust in the team, and this is where you get the collaboration and shorten the iterative cycles, certainly around design. The one thing never to forget, though, is although you implement these IT methodologies and these workflows, you've got to keep talking to one another. There is a tendency to just shut down and put yourself in a box and not really discuss these things with people. That is a major part of the collaborative activity between people. IT supporting that, and a series of processes enabling you to set the thing flowing.
Okay, and coming from private sector and public sector, and you guys have started implementing and have had some success, do you think ISO has been like a guiding light in that direction?
For us personally, I think it's been very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It's given us a path to follow. Now, where we end up in the future, I don't know if it's going to be full 19650 or not. A lot of that work is being led by national, but at least we have something to get us started. So I think for us, it's been a nice early path for us to give us some guidance and direction on where to go.
And then from our side, it's really helped actually drive our business, because what the ISO has given us is a way to structure our data and structure our information, right, through that common data environment. And I mentioned we're feeding our other tools, and we are seriously, it's starting to bring everything together, and this brings the idea to everyone, not just us BIM people, our schedulers, our estimators, our project management, construction managers, this idea of having a standard breakdown and everyone communicating on that standard breakdown has been really really helpful on our side.
Okay. I have I've gone through the standards first two parts, and with my limited knowledge on the standards, there are terms used like lead appointed party, and an appointing party. How are organizations adopting those designations inside of their organization? So I know Len mentioned about that they did change some roles because they didn't fit into the system that they had. So how have you guys just took that translation inside your organization?
I'd like to hear from Ben on this one.
Yeah. See, everyone's laughing at me. So what we do is when we get the requirements, we're actually going through it. I literally had a meeting this morning on it. So we're trying to map our current roles and the current way things we call the current responsibilities with these appointed parties. I'm used to employers rep, task team manager. What does that mean? What type of role could we appoint to that? Doesn't have to be a full-time position, could be part of someone's job, it's part of their responsibilities. So I'll be honest with you, we haven't done a full mapping exercise, but we are going through it now. And an organization is so big that I'm in, it's going to be a hard task to, get some of those responsibilities into other people. So yeah, it's the tough part of it, but you need to understand how you're currently structured. And this is why I've took my time with ACON. I haven't just come in and said you need this role and this role, and I've understood how we work and how we operate first, and now I'm trying to map it, because we are doing a lot of this. It's just the formalization of it, right, through a set of requirements.
And how have you guys done it in BSPC, Len?
Yeah, so very similar to Ben. Like, I think you're seeing a lot of times it's like a portion of somebody fits into this, and it's a portion of this, or it could be a group of people, each of them having the same responsibilities as the other, but they've kind of got portions of it. So we're not quite there yet in the holistic view or the holistic sense, but at least we're sort of thinking about it, and we're looking at how this might roll out down the future.
Okay. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud. So when we say appointing party, necessarily the intention behind, and this is a question for MERVYN, is this mostly coming from the owner side? Is owner the one mostly who's the appointed party, or it can be a major consultant that's representing the owner?
Yes, I think first of all, you have to understand the language of ISO. So these things like appointing party, lead appointing party, or whatever. These are terms that when you're writing international standards, you have to come up with a terminology that is transferable into a lot of different languages. So English, French, German, Spanish, whatever, they're not common languages. So you have to find that legal language which can be transferred into all of them. And sometimes I think it confuses us. Certainly in the UK, I don't think we will adopt the terms appointed, lead appointed, etc. The other problem you've got with appointing party is the client can be an appointing party, but then the major contractor can also be an appointing party because he's appointing his subcontractors. So you really need to be careful of these things. In the UK, the language has to be adaptable and adopted by the legal wording, the legal terminology that's used in contracts. So clients, suppliers, supply chains, these are all government terminologies that sit within those contracts. So I think every country is going to have to look at what do each of those things mean to you, and how do they fit into your legal system. So they will be a slightly different application in different countries. Don't get hung up on it though. Don't try to force appointed party into all of your contracts. You just lead yourself into a lot of harm, a lot of work. Let's put it that way. No, look at the terminologies you want to use and make sure that you've aligned it properly. And I think that term alignment that Len has used is the appropriate thing here.
Okay, so and again, I would come to one question that Len was. The question is related to something that Len talked about. So role of information manager is not clearly defined in ISO. And I understand some of the roles have to be open-ended so that organizations can take a person or group of people as information managers. These days, I have seen a few organizations coming up with certifications. So ISO, BIM according to ISO certification. How much relevant are these certifications in real world, especially when you're talking about managing information or awarding contracts?
Could I just, there is a specification, which I think is worthwhile looking at. It was produced by the CIC, the construction industry in the UK, CIC. If you like to Google it, it is actually a document on the role of the information management. And that gives quite a good definition of what this really is. In ISO, it's not defined properly, as you rightly say. I would guide you towards that particular document. Okay, it was written in the UK by the CIC, and that role of the information manager is aligned to something else, which was the original BIM mandate, which has recently been updated by the IPA document in the UK. It's worthwhile looking at both those documents, the original mandate version 2, which aligns with that, the role of the information manager from the CIC. It's a good starting point.
Okay, yeah, I'd have written down those phrases to look at them after this discussion. So again, coming back to, and this is for both Len and Ben, do you really would look at a certified professional or a certified institute to take care of ISO implementation, or it doesn't matter at this point of time?
I think for us at this point, we'll take whatever we can get, but it's not going to hurt. But we don't have a requirement at this point for any kind of accreditation or certification. I think it's something that we would be looking at as our organization evolves, especially when we start to talk about classification of responsibilities and job classifications. There might be additional requirements for certification or what have you. But for the time being, I think we're still too new to hammer that out or make that a fundamental requirement for anyone going forward right now, but something down the road.
Yeah, and then from our side, we're driven by the clients, eh? So if the clients require it, we'll go do it. But at the same time as well, everyone needs to understand information management. They need to, it's a core part of everyone's job, in my opinion. That there's, and I have these fights every day and on our projects, and we internally are building up our educational program around it. So I think internally, there's no reason why you can't have your own educational program, awareness, and then take it to different levels, intermediate, and then expert, and then map your roles against what they need to know and make it part of your learning and development matrix. That's a lot of stuff that we're doing internally with our L&D, learning and development department. So take it on internally. And if there are third parties out there that can give you a good awareness of what this is and it helps, go for it. As you know, awareness and education, it can only help you, right? But in terms of making it a mandate and a requirement for us as a business, I'm going to be purely driven by clients and the need for bidding projects and that. So.
Okay. Okay. One of the last questions I have on my mind is, do you think, I mean, right now, I don't find like, and Mervyn did mention that PAS 1192 had like a particular structure to follow, let's say for file naming or organization of data. Are we going to see in future ISO would have something like that? Because the standards keep on improving and we keep on getting them, you know, reiterated. Do you think this is it? We have to have our own data organization structure, which is either speaking to our company standards or speaking to the national standards. This is a question for Mervyn. So are we—
Sorry, I was just waiting for somebody else to take the lead. There, I'm not quite sure where you want to go with that. There are other ISOs that give you a starting point. So don't just focus on ISO 19650. There are other ISOs out there that are not in the 19650 range that talk about naming conventions or container conventions, data structures, data dictionaries, all these sorts of things. You do have to look at those to see where they fit within your requirement. The major one for ISO 19650, of course, is around the common data environment and the file naming convention, which is totally different from other container naming conventions. The file naming convention, just to put this to rest, is, I find, one of the most annoying things, having been involved in developing it 20 odd years ago. There are millions of variations to a naming convention. The major thing is, if we're going to use that word collaboration, then we need one that we can all understand. I don't care which one it is, as long as there's one that we all understand and it's consistent. Because if every software solution for a common data environment has the same file naming convention, you only have to write it once. Where they're making money at the moment, and I will push this back to the vendors, you know, £200,000 configuration for each CDE that's made available out there. I mean, it's great business. Not good business for us as users, great business for the software houses. So a single file naming convention that everybody adopts saves money for us all. But that's a difficult one to achieve. Everybody will want their own national version.
Yeah, and then the Canadian annex that's been developed. So if everyone can go back to my earlier presentation, go on there, take that, and have a read. That's what we tried to do with Building Smart and the Canadian annex. It talks about this stuff, but we had huge conversations. You can't mandate the file naming convention. Right. You can only advise on it, or you know, as a minimum standard. You need these things within your convention, but you need consistency by the owner or on the project or whatever it is. So that's what the Canadian annex is trying to do, and it's trying to break out some of that. And and that's why I think they use the UK annex, because that's similar to what that's trying to do. And so that's definitely worth looking at if everyone could go on and have a look at it.
Okay, sure. I am getting some questions, and I think we do have some time from audience. So would you guys want to answer some of the questions from audience? First question is anybody using Plannerly's templates for ISO?
Yeah, that's actually interesting. So we did actually look at Plannerly for some of the templates. I think we're not actually using them, but it gave us some ideas for directions that we wanted to go.
Is there any particular reason you didn't go with it, or it's just you want to develop?
You know, yeah, I think that's a good question. in all fairness, being with the government of Canada, we like to do our own thing, right? So that's pretty much the reason why we chose to develop our own.
Okay.
And for us, I forget the software solution. It's more the process of what that's trying to achieve. So we have an internal process around content plan management and stuff like that we do internally. We're trying to build that first, build that education with our preferred suppliers and preferred designers, and then there's many tools out there, right? As long as you're following that sort of concept and process of managing your content and managing the information, then you're good.
Okay. And talking about that, there ISO does not talk about open BIM, or why has that been left behind? Because that's also something that's very close to me. I think we in construction industry have a thing or two to learn from IT. We still are not looking at open BIM platforms to do our work. Are we thinking of something like that in future?
Who's going to develop it? We've been trying to do this since 1995.
Okay.
Through the International Alliance of Interoperability is where it started. We all wanted every bit of software that's out there to be able to talk to every other piece of software that's out there. Here we are 25 years later, we're still no closer. If my personal view, and I'll get shot down for this, is if the industry, and that is the software industry, really wants all of the different software to talk with one another, they can do it tomorrow. But there is no commercial reason for them to do it. Don't forget, the software houses are doing this for their business, not for yours.
Okay. Okay.
Can I just add something to open standards, right? I don't know why we can't share native formats and consistently and trust each other and share the information through the common data environment and agree that's the platform for this project we're going to work on. I know, but that's how we're working at the moment internally with our, when we, particularly infrastructure, we can't get there. So that's how we do it. But just have that agreement in place and have the conversation up front when you're doing these things and these projects. That's all I'll say on it, just to add to what Mervyn said.
Okay. Cry Backman is asking, as Ben said, in Canada, BIM equals Revit. So is it better to call this something new, which a few organizations do, or should we get people to understand that their definition of BIM needs to change?
Mervyn, I was going to say better information management. Hey,
there you go. Thank you. You beat me to it. That's what I was going to say.
No, go back to where it started, which was project information management. BIM was just the commercialization to sell more CAD, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, project information management and modeling was where we started with this way back 20 odd years ago. It was captured and building information modeling. Let's face it, that's just talks about buildings. What about the rest of the construction industry? So PIM covers everybody. We're managing all data for a common good.
Yeah, somebody in the comment section is writing that they have BIM'd long before they learned how to do Revit. So,
well,
yeah,
PIM was there long before BIM as well. So, yeah.
Okay. There is one out. Andrew Davis is asking, has there been much investigation into classification systems in Canada versus Uniclass in UK?
Sorry, has there been
much investigation as to classification systems in Canada versus Uniclass in UK? I am not sure how this relates, but
Uniclass is the latest derivation of ISO. Don't forget, that's also covered by an ISO. So that's ISO 12006.
Right.
So you have to look at that to see how you would classify things. So it's and the UK has got its version, which is Uniclass, as you say. which is also a combination of 3 other classifications of yesteryear that have been brought together.
So just going through across Canada and the projects I work on. So some we get master format as a requirement. Some I get uni format. Some I'm getting only class. So I've got a massive mapping table internally where we're mapping it all together. But yeah, that's it. I don't think there's been a Canadian focus. It's just very much industry driven towards what classification works best for that industry.
Yeah, and then I think it's also very, very client specific. If I'm somebody who wants uniclass, my consultants will have to follow that. Okay, do we have more questions? Okay, somebody is asking, what are the other ISO standards that they need to look at to get to the final one source of truth for naming conventions and stuff?
There are hundreds, I'm sorry to say. Some of them you wouldn't think fit into this, but they do at the end of the day. They're constantly being updated as well. I'm sorry to be vague, but you really need to be in the standards community to see the hundreds of things that could affect you. I mean, the stuff out there on just IFC, for instance, is that part of what you want to be doing? It's something you want to be using. Are you using the right MVDs? I mean, there are ISOs covering that as well. There are naming conventions. There are drawing conventions, whereas ISO 13567, for instance. I mean, you could go on forever. You've got to pick the ones that can come together and you can use collaboratively. That's basically what we did when we first put together the BS 1192. That's the way we worked. And that made it easier to adopt and adapt. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there are a lot of questions around what other standards to follow. So I think, like MERVYN said, let's do our digging ourselves. Let's actually get into the standard. Let's first start with reading ISO 19650 and see what all other standards does it point to. And then let's see whatever we can digest.
Indeed.
Okay, I think we're towards the end of the panel discussion. Any last words anybody wants to say? Anything else? Because I'm done.
No, I'd just say thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure and a great experience. Thanks very much for letting me in.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for organizing.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. With CHETNA, great moderation of this panel discussion.
Oh, thank you so much. My pleasure. It's been eye-opening for me for a lot of things, especially, I mean, with all due respect to both the panelists, Len and Ben, but I was looking forward mostly to MERVYN's presentation.
Oh, we all were.
We all were, yeah. Like, I'm just glad we could get him in.
Thanks very much for letting me come in. Thank you.
Well, save the date for the next round of the team discussion.
I'll be there.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. It was a great insight, a great participants. I just messaged in the chat that we are still close to 100 people in this chat, so in this session. So well done, everyone, and thank you for your time. And we're so happy to host you today. And next year we'll organize something new. So please send us your suggestions. And if you want to see certain specific topic in discussion, then just let us know. We'll make it happen. Okay, any last words, Jeff?
No, I think you said it. No, the same thing for tBIMc as well. We're going to be trying to do more of these collaboration between different affiliates across Canada. And just the whole idea of being in kind of the world of BIM and the fact that we're not communicating, I think, is a problem. So I think we're going to put more effort into kind of doing these joint events and talking more to each other.
Great. So yeah, the recording will be available to you online in our LinkedIn page in dbNCR, and also maybe tBIMc will post something there too, and we will post it in YouTube and share the link as well. So please stay tuned and have a good rest of the day.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank
Cheers.
you.